Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. That's right, we're talking about The Black Phone on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from the working class suburbs of North Denver. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we're dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. And we're going to unpack all the goriest details of 2022's The Black Phone in the hopes that a young middle school goer's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at their expense. Ooh, that sounded bad as it came out of my mouth. And there's only one person I trust to commemorate my high pinball score by carving it into my arm with a switchblade. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I'm just letting forth with just a slew of profanities, as you know, as only an adorable little girl can.
That's right. This is one thing I really enjoy about this is kids swearing.
Oh well, you get that. You get that in spades.
You really do. So, in our effort to talk about Stephen King, obviously, there's one person that we really can't leave behind, and that is his children, who have also written books, and some of those books have been made into movies. I don't believe Owen has had anything that has made it to screens yet, but Joe Hill has. So I guess my first question to you, Gina, before we get into the movie proper, is do you have any literary or cinematic relationship with one Joe Hill?
I have read I guess you pronounce it Nosferatu, right?
Yes, I believe so.
I read that and enjoyed it. Did not watch the TV series because I decided from the get-go this was not something that would come across well on film.
I think you're right about that.
Because it's such an absurd notion, but that you know, I think that it works better in one's imagination than on the screen. I did read Heart-Shaped Box. I enjoyed that one quite a bit. And I did read the collection that this comes from, and I remember none of them. Especially not this one.
Oh, really? This is the only one that I did remember from 20th Century Ghosts.
I do not remember them in the slightest.
Yeah. I read Heart-Shaped Box when it came out on hardback, and that remains to this day my favorite Joe Hill. I read Horns. I found it a fun trifle. I read Nosferatu, and I'm like, there's a lot going on here, and it does kind of... it has a lot of talisman elements to it, which I enjoyed, but I also don't want to constantly compare him to his dad. Like, that's not what I'm really trying to get out of him necessarily.
Well, I think we're going to get to that, for me at least, when we get to the movie itself and where my issues with it lay.
Yeah. And then I'd also read a bunch of Lock and Key, which I very much enjoyed. And so I have not read some of his longer works. The Fireman I have not read. I know he's got another one called King of Sorrow that's going to be coming out soon. That's also like brimming 1,000 pages from what I've seen. And I get a little intimidated when people go that long. It's something that I tolerate with his dad, and I'm not entirely sure I'm committed to with him.
Yeah, there's always a moment of pause when you download a book for an e-reader and you see time to read 15 hours.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm gonna have to renew this one a couple times.
Right. Yes, especially if you Libby it. That's absolutely true. Whereas I could, fire through Horns pretty quickly. That 1,000 pages does seem intimidating with the way I read, which is I read between 20 and 30 pages and then fall asleep. And I enjoy that rhythm. It prepares me for slumber, and that's what I like. I wish I could live a life where I could just read in the middle of the day and whatnot. But unfortunately, capitalism has a stranglehold on my neck and continues to squeeze.
I mean, yeah, that's for me. That's where taking mass transit comes in handy.
Right. Yeah. Well, in LA, or at least in Long Beach, not so much. For me, I don't have anywhere to take it to. No one will have me. Anyways, let's talk about the black phone. So, yeah, I did remember the short story. So when this was, put out there, this was going to happen. I was like, that story's like 30-ish pages. It's very concise and streamlined. So I was like, there's always a interesting dynamic when it comes to a short story being adapted for a film. Obviously, you're going to be able to encompass almost everything that's in that story. And you're also going to be able to expand upon it, which if you're going to adapt, let's say, 1,000-page book, you're barely going to be able to scratch the surface. So what would be the additional elements to this that would make it come alive as a cinematic effort? And I think I was somewhat bolstered by Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill, the internet's most positive writing coach, and that their participation in this sounded like, okay, I at least trust them to a degree. I have a love. I wouldn't say love-hate, because I don't think I hate anything that they've managed to produce, but I have a love ambivalence thing with Derrickson. Sometimes this stuff comes off a little, I don't know,
kingish.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, Sinister, obviously, I think I wouldn't say obviously, because there are plenty of people who that might not work for, but I do believe that Sinister is like truly his best effort.
It is. Yeah, it is a word people like to use is overrated.
Right.
I think it's rated perfectly right. I think it is a very well done, very effective movie.
Yes, I think effective is perhaps the most laser accurate description of it, because it's exactly what it says on the tin. It delivers a lot of what you're asking for. I think it poisoned the minds of Blumhouse features because they have been chasing, to a degree, Sinister ever since. I know they have other films that they've tried to replicate over and over and over again, but I do feel like Sinister was one of those things that are like, if we can make this movie more sinister.
Yeah, literally to the point where their production company card resembles Sinister.
Evokes it quite often, and they keep changing it. I'm not really sure if the one that I saw in front of this is the same one they have today, because they've been on an interesting streak as of late that's not particularly good. And I would say The Black Phone and Megan were the last two that really did well for them that I can remember. So it came out in 2022. It had, it feels pandemic-y, and the fact that there's barely anybody in it. And when there are sequences with multiple people, they seem to be seated far away from one another. And what are you going to do? People needed to make movies, and we need to keep people safe, from a legitimate disease that killed over 1 million people. Sorry to that weird wheezing man who breathes like Jason Voorhees after he's been resurrected from a lake. But like, that's a real fucking thing, and no one deserves to get it just because they have to go to work. So that I can all deal with. And I think the other element of this that I found interesting is that Derrickson in particular is a rather vocal, but strangely not terrible Christian. He seems to be a Christian who like has a personal faith and ethos, but also is not an a-hole. And that's something that's worthy of celebration in this day and age. And I think he recontextualizes the sister character, who in the book is actually an older sister. And here she's now younger. And she has this struggle with faith that's also connected to, how would I describe the psychic element in this book? Oh, yeah, The Shining. She has the shine.
Yeah.
It's passed down from her mother to her. Her brother obviously has an element, not to the degree that she has, but it's said over the course of the film that other people hear the phone ring, but when they pick it up, they don't hear anything. And Finney does. So one has to believe that while not nearly as strong as his sister Shine, he has the touch, as it were.
Right.
So I think adding this familiar Shine variant to this is really interesting. In the book, like Susanna, his older sister, has a connection through tarot cards. And I think it's kind of been done a bit to death in movies as of late. So I enjoyed that they found a different way to tackle this particular thing that felt immediate and interesting for her character and immediate and interesting for Finney's character. Please.
I have the feeling that you might have enjoyed this movie a little more than I did.
Okay.
Now, let me preface it by saying it's fine.
Sure.
It is absolutely fine. I think that Ethan Hawke's performance carries about 75% of the weight in it.
True.
I think that he's having a very good time playing this very over the top villain who what I think is a hilarious touch is when he's not terrorizing adolescent boys. He's just kind of a schlub.
Right.
Who like lives in his crappy little house with his loser brother, and who is so stoned half the time he does not realize that he has children stored in his house. But I think that aspect of it is funny. But I would be I want to go back and reread the short story since I remember nothing about it, because I feel like that there's so much Stephen King pastiche in this that I don't know if that came from the story or if that's what Cargill and Derrickson added in later. Like, this feels like if you were to tell me that this was going to show up in an episode of Welcome to Derry when that comes out, sure, I would 100% believe you. This feels like an It side story.
Yeah.
Where you've got this little crappy town where kids are disappearing and nobody really seems to give a shit. It is like, you've got these kids who are still all going off by themselves. No adults are looking out for them or anything. I mean, I think it's supposed to be, it's set in the mid 70s.
78, yeah.
Which I guess sort of explains why this is going on, except I feel like, again, and you and I both are members of Generation X. Let's face it, we are a bit overselling that whole, our parents didn't care about what we did, and you could disappear for like an entire day and no one would look for you. Yeah, that's
I think true. In comparison to the
now,
sort of,
to now,
the amount
yes.
of even unintentional surveillance I can have over my child, it is a night and day.
Oh, sure. But like if you grew up in a small town and children were regularly being kidnapped off the street.
Yeah.
I am pretty sure, you would at least have, a neighborhood parent looking out for you.
Yes, I agree. But I also feel like a lot of this is being told through Finney and Gwen's perspective. And as far as they're concerned, no one is actively looking. And that's, I think, the perspective that I enjoy about the movie is that I don't need to know the grabber's backstory. I don't need to know a lot about these cops. I don't need to know about the media environment in North Denver. And so from their perspective, this is just this kind of thing they talk about when they see the handbills posted to chain link fences, and not this, what we would assume would be a national story akin to the national story that the guy in Atlanta who grabbed multiple children became, that the story that John Wayne Gacy kind of became eventually, although he was able to grab lots of kids for a really long time.
Well, Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, a lot of them were older teenagers and all too. These are like, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds. But like, I just feel like that they're really going for a, and then you've got the psychotic bullies and I just, there's a little too much, I don't know, like it's a little bit of a bingo card happening.
I think that's true. I think if you're going to add things to this story, it's inevitable that you're going to be adding elements that just come off Stephen King simply because there's a supernatural element to it. And there's just a structure of his storytelling that people want to replicate because it works so well. In my opinion, the semi-autobiographical element that Derrickson adds to this, I think, is one of the more successful layers that's, put on the entire ordeal. It has a very non-nostalgic look at 1978, with the exception of a couple needle drops, where suburban working class youth might have a, very understandable undercurrent of restlessness, constantly told how safe they are when what can hurt them resides in the exact same kind of little box that they live in, whether that's domestic violence or the grabber. And for me, that sort of realism element is what helps. It's the spoonful of sugar that helps the supernatural go down. I really enjoy that part. And yes, the bully element, I think, is quite pervasive here. But I also did get the shit beaten out of me in grade school and middle school. So that's the kernel of truth for me. That, this is, aggrandized to a certain degree. But I think it makes more sense when you simply view it as through the eyes of Finney and Gwyn. Like, to them, this is super, super dangerous. This is constant violence. This is adults never caring about them, because that's kind of the environment that they see around them when they're living with a human time bomb of their dad.
That's a good, you do make a good point that, from their perspective, they don't really have anybody looking out for them.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, I also like that Derrickson sort of described his youth thusly, quote, there was just a lot of violence. Everybody got whipped by their parents, and there was fighting on the way to school, in between classes, on the way back home. And then he mentions things that were very big in his mind at this moment in his life in 1978. He mentioned that Ted Bundy was all over the news as a kid. And that's when I was like, oh, right. The Night Stalker trauma that I keep bringing up over and over on the show is a lot like that. When you see that there's this person on the loose who could murder you in your sleep, right? That adds an element of paranoia to your childhood, because you don't really understand how that looks or feels or any rules around it. Bundy was accused of 4 murders in Colorado, managed to escape custody inside the Denver courthouse. He gets picked up like 6 days later and escapes from jail again. And
jumps right out the library window.
Straight out the library window, heads straight to Florida, where he murders again. And it's when that stuff is seeped into your childhood, it takes a bigger, standing in your life. You just feel less safe. And your parents really can't control that any more than I could control the psychological effects of COVID on my kid. I could tell him that we were safer to stay at home and that this was difficult, but we would find a way through it and everything. But he still had lots of things he had to work through after that fact to feel safe going places when you're constantly told, well, the safest place to be right now is here. Oh, by the way, 18 months later, enjoy middle school. But Derrickson likes to refer to horror material he works on as, quote, cinema of non-denial, meaning that the supernatural elements once exposed are so evident to the affected parties that they can't really regress into unbelief because that would be nice. They have to confront the reality of the supernatural in order to survive the threat. And so that kind of becomes an interesting factor here that worked for me, but I understand it just won't work for everyone.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's a well-made movie. But there are just certain elements that felt a little too familiar for me to really become completely engaged with it.
Thank you for calling the Bombas Comfort Line. Bombas make socks, slippers, tees, and underwear made with the highest quality materials. Press 1 for comfort, 2 for style, 3 for donation. You chose style. Bombas has styles for whatever you enjoy. You can run in Bombas, lounge in Bombas, dress them up, dress them down, but always give back in Bombas. Because with every item purchased, another is donated. Bombas, comfort worth calling for. Go to bombas.com/audio and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com and use code AUDIO.
I feel like this is one of those things that will work for those who it will work on and might be less effective for those that don't. And it just really depends on whether or not it grabs you. Is that because of the ages or the relative confluence of backstory that, you know, made me latch onto it a little bit easier? That's entirely possible. I'm susceptible to such things. This is evident by 9 years of this podcast of how susceptible I am to things. That being said, Becky also describes me as someone who wants to like things.
That's a good thing, though.
It is a good thing, but it should be a kernel that, you know, people who listen to the show for a long time have to keep in mind that I go into it with a real attitude of, hey, I'm going to try to like this. Something I'm going to hold on to. And this will mean nothing when this episode comes out. But tomorrow night, Becky and I are going to the opening night of Spinal Tap 2. And I've never held tighter onto the idea of I want to like things.
Oh, yeah, I'm so scared. I am so scared to be disappointed.
Yeah. And that's completely understandable. It really, really is, but it means so much to us. And I was kind of like cautious about it, but she wants to believe. And I want to believe, but sometimes those beliefs are dashed. And what will be left of us if they are?
You gotta be honest with me. You gotta tell me as soon as you can, like how it turned out.
Yes. I will,
because I am obviously waiting for people I trust, such as yourself, to let me know how it is before I invest time in it.
Yes,
it's good too. I'm not impressed with people who go through like constantly cynical about everything.
Yes,
because you're just missing out on so much joy in your life.
Right.
And, in the end, if it turns out to be bad, it's going to be disappointing, but it's like, can't be all winners.
That's true. A good college try is worth something. And we've celebrated those things. I don't know. I'm not really sure that Killer Party and Spinal Tap 2 will ever hold the same space in my mind. Because Spinal Tap 2 has a long way to fall off before it reaches the highs of Killer Party. And those highs are very high, but they're very weird and individual. What were we talking about again? Oh, the black phone. So I think one of the things that's interesting when anyone sort of tackles the Stephen Kingiverse, right? And we first really confronted this idea when we talked about Christine, is King's idea of nostalgia is that there's so much joy to celebrate within the moments. And understands the reality of the situation, that things were not as rosy as they seemed. There's an undercurrent of violence, racism, misogyny. All these things are a part of the environment. But he also tends to find a way to sweeten things up with sugar. Whereas Carpenter's view of the past is he wants to confront stark reality of what it is. His version of, suburban America in 1978 was that all these people are telling themselves a lie. And all it takes is one person who refuses to conform to any semblance of aesthetic peacefulness, and the entire thing will be shattered. And that's what happens at the end of Halloween. There's just pictures of, this is where something bad happened. 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 And when those two things meet in Christine, it's such an interesting friction of storytelling modes. And so when I think the most successful sort of King adaptations, and we're just kind of throwing Joe Hill into that pile, is that you kind of have to have both in order to make that friction work. When one is absent, it'll just become over sugary, the Archies. And if you have too much of the other, it'll just become sort of nihilism akin to, I don't know, a House of a Thousand Corpses sort of deal.
Or the Rob Zombie remake of Halloween.
Right.
Where it's just like, there's no goodness and light to balance out the darkness. It's all darkness.
Right.
Well, I will say that one thing I do actually think that is done well in this is sort of setting up to, this being the period where people, we're starting to figure out that, this is the era before, stranger danger.
Yes.
And faces on the milk cartons and all. And, where people were confused because children were, bad things happen to children sometimes. And, we had to sort of deal with this concept of that these are people in our neighborhoods.
Right.
And I think that it eventually grew into, it was such a terrifying notion to us that, I say us, like we were children ourselves and, our parents and our parents' peers and all, that I think it almost led to a certain denial that grew into, the strange man in the car offering candy.
Yes.
Because that's not usually how it happened.
Right.
It was usually,
someone you knew. It was
the coach or your friend's dad or your non-custodial parent,
And, I don't know that there's a lot of fun to be had in engaging in a story that it tells this sort of tale with that level of reality. They're certainly out there, the Snowtown murders, and I think it's tougher to project the sort of stark reality of that time necessarily, where you get into that. It's just before that 80s phenomenon of child kidnapping now means so much to the media that they will promote the idea of putting their pictures on milk cartons and making TV movies about it. We're just on the edge of that. And there's still this need to make the kidnapper the other rather than the reality of many of these people, which was, as you said, the coach, your friend's dad, the kindly guy who, would hand things out of his garage to people to gain their trust.
I mean, he still lives in the neighborhood.
True.
We don't, as you say, we know nothing about his backstory, but presumably, he has a normal face. Like I say, he's just this sort of schlub.
Right.
Like when we see him out of his mask, he's just a guy.
Yeah. That's what I was kind of surprised by when I started to read about other people's contemporaneous reviews and sort of reactions at the time. One of the major complaints was that, hey, I'm not getting a backstory. I'm not getting a backstory for the grabber. And while part of me gets that, the point of the film is not really to explore why this pedophile murderer does what he does.
Because he's a pedophile murderer.
Right.
That's the explanation.
There's no good explanation.
I mean, all we need to know is that he lives in the town and somehow he's been getting away with this for a while.
Right. It is alluded at one point that he might have a connection to the police, that they're being fed information that isn't true. And so therefore they're constantly looking the wrong way. There's, one sort of where the pinball bully kid is dropped off at his house and Gwen is remote viewing through her dreams, him being dropped off. And there's a police radio in the car. It's not the black van. So is he connected to the police? I don't know. That's maybe something that'll get answered in the sequel. Something that I only remembered this week was actually happening. But I think the grabber's whole thing ultimately is that it's misdirection. His lair is the fucking prestige magic trick, Gina.
Yeah.
He has two houses.
He, like I said, he has this deadbeat brother who doesn't even realize that he's bringing kids there.
Right. Who's so obsessed with cracking the case, he has no idea the case is happening where he lives.
It's literally under his nose.
And then I think the other thing that I think ends up working really well, that's an addition, because in the short story, the grabber's like, of course he's overweight, because why not drag that, Stephen King trope up? And he wears clown makeup, which I think is a very obvious place to go. And this is a good rewrite in that the masks he wears are a progression of the game that he wants to play with his victims.
The masks are very creepy.
Yes.
I do like the masks with like they're a little bit evocative of comedy and tragedy masks, which I think is kind of cool. I do think that is very effective.
Yeah. The story is kind of like, oh, it's a little bit John Wayne Gacy. It's a little bit Pennywise. And I get both that nod and wink, but I think I enjoy the other additive Stephen King elements. They feel less like a painted on reference and more like, here are things that are successful that we can weave into this, because the core spine of this as a short story is so slight just by pure page count that it leaves plenty of room to expand it beyond that. The multiple masks and everything seem to be a manifestation of this game that he wants to play, this scenario he wants to relive over and over and over again, which is not unusual for serial murderers. There's usually a fantasy they're trying to replicate. And obviously this has the most to do with a sort of power dynamic. That is a weird reflection of Finney and Gwen's dad, who also is violent, seemingly because of his experiences in Vietnam, seemingly because his wife had some level of shine to her that drove her to take her life at some point, and alcoholism. And he just he's so desperate to keep them, quote unquote, safe, that their lives are very unsafe in his presence.
Right.
And so I think when ultimately the most sort of King-like element to this is that as Finney converses with these ghosts via the black phone, they tell him of their attempts to get out of the basement. And while not any one particular piece of advice that they give him ultimately is why he gets out, it is the culmination of their advice that actually builds upon one another. All their failures add up to his victory. The hole under the tile that he digs deeper, the cord along the wall that he'll use to climb and rip off the metal grate around the window. He hides the metal grate in the hole. This will come back into play later. And of course, making the phone receiver into a weapon. And even the most frustrating element for him, learning that there's a hole in the wall that he can get into, but it's the back of a freezer. And of course, he can't kick open the door to this freezer. He's just trapped inside this freezer. That's this ultimate moment of him like, this is the lowest I'll ever be. But because he has access to the freezer, he gets a slab of meat that he's able to, placate Bruiser, the dog, later on. And so all of these things don't add up, individually are not victories. It's all of their failures that he capitalizes on and ultimately is told that unlike the abuse that he witnesses of his sister and unlike the beatings he takes at school from bullies, unlike he's unable to stand up for himself or really pitch his best game from the mound, if he does truly stand up for himself, he does stand a chance against this guy. And then he prevails. That is very Stephen King coded.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, it's a classic underdog tale.
Right.
Where, he has to use like his wits and his innate stubbornness, from basically, taking a licking and keeping on ticking, to keep going. And I think there are certain clever elements that make this almost feel like, he's in a sort of, escape room where the prize is his life.
Yes.
It's a little bit like a video game where like, you have these like characters who go up and explain to you, and then you should go there like, boop, boop, go over there and get the puzzle piece and put it here. And I don't mean that as a derogatory way. I think it's clever. Yeah. And I think that's it's a in so much you can, call a movie about a child escaping from a pedophile child killer fun. I think that that gives it a fun twist.
Right. And I do think like there's this component to it where these five ghosts can't talk to one another, but they can communicate to him, and he's able to put all those puzzle pieces together because he's willing to listen. And I don't think most of those characters were ever willing to listen. Certainly the grabber himself is not willing to listen, which is why he hears the phone ring, but never hears a voice. Finney is uniquely situated by both the sort of shine that he does have and the person that he is, that he's willing to listen. Because he does you come from such a troubled home, and beyond that, and also in regards to his shine, I think that the implication is he is a more empathetic person. Yes,
and can literally hear the voice of the voiceless.
Yeah, and I think one of the other really interesting elements here is that it expands beyond Finney's circumstance to how Gwen, his little sister, combats this problem as well. She doesn't sit on the sidelines. And we see that previously when Finney is attacked by three bullies. She throws herself into that situation, beating one of them with a rock, also very evocative of it. And, getting, the crap kicked out of her by these guys and still, holding her own. She's not going to be the one to shy away from trying to figure out a way towards finding her brother. And so even though her father is very vicious in his denial and attempted repression of her powers, she knows what's on the line. She wanted to do something about this previous to the fact. I guess my question to you, it is proposed at one point in the movie in a scene between Gwen and Finney that if you say the grabber's name, he's now suddenly aware that you exist. You become a target because you sort of Candyman yourself into the situation. Is that actually true?
I think that if it is, we are going to, if it's intentionally so, that's going to be elaborated upon in the second one. Because clearly the second one is going to lean far more into the supernatural elements of it. I mean, he's dead.
Yes.
But he is very obviously showing up in the trailers for the second one. Now, how much he actually is in it, is unclear, but is he going to be like a Freddy Krueger type? Is it just going to be Finn is simply just haunted by his memories of him? That's not really certain. But I think this aspect that you bring up is, if that is, meant to be taken seriously, that, I can't imagine it's not going to be elaborated upon in the next one.
It is interesting to try to pick up, because this did rather well. It was made for around $17 million. It ended up collecting 161 worldwide, which is a very good return on investment. So I know that Universal loves a horror icon, and they want this to happen. They wanted Megan to happen too. And I think they kind of overplayed that card with the Megan 2.0 sequel. And people were a little like, okay, I enjoyed the joke of it, but I'm not entirely sure I needed more of that.
Right. I liked Megan a lot, but I did not come away from it thinking I need more of that.
Yeah, I certainly don't think I needed a Terminator 2 Judgment Dayification of Megan, which seems to be what happened. But I think when you, I'm, again, a huge Akilah Cooper stan, so, you remove her from the situation, my interest in that is going to go way down.
Right.
Whereas I honestly don't know what Derrickson and Cargill's participation in the Black Phone 2 is. That's probably something I should have investigated before we began this podcast.
Well, while we're talking, let me look it up. I happen to have my phone right here.
Excellent. I do know, while you're looking that up, that there is already a sequel to the Black Phone. Did you know that a story in VHS 85 is actually a semi-prequel, or not prequel, but sequel to the Black Phone?
I did not. And to answer your question, they are both involved in it.
Okay, excellent. So, I am probably more interested now than I was previous to what's going to happen with the sequel, because there does feel like, could you Kruger this guy? Could you Krugerify this man, this ghost? Or are we just going to get a lot of backstory I didn't need the first time to really find the story interesting?
I mean, I will say there is a character who is listed as supervisor of Alpine Lake Camp. So I am not sure.
Right. But at least Derrickson's directing it, Cargill's writing it. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think I'm more interested now than I was previous. And I do like that they kept the same actors and we're going to see them a little bit older. I don't know. I have a little faith in it now that I might not have had in it previous. But I do feel like, is this one of those things where they're going to overplay the semi-cult that this movie had? Was it just that people were so happy to be in a movie theater and this gave them an opportunity to go see a horror movie that they just went to it? Or does the grabber have a secret chokehold on people the way The Conjuring so, hugely overplayed in that first weekend? That was such a fucking monster hit.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're also dealing with the possibility that there might be a little bit of oversaturation going on. But on the other hand, they very cannily are releasing this 2 weeks before Halloween.
Right.
So that's a smart move, and it also suggests that the studio has a lot of faith in it.
Yes.
That they think that the audiences are going to come out, because, well, it's Halloween, let's go see a scary movie.
Right.
Thank you for calling the Bombas Comfort Line. Bombas make socks, slippers, tees, and underwear made with the highest quality materials. Press 1 for comfort, 2 for style, 3 for donation. You chose style. Bombas has styles for whatever you enjoy. You can run in Bombas, lounge in Bombas, dress them up, dress them down, but always give back in Bombas. Because with every item purchased, another is donated. Bombas, comfort worth calling for. Go to bombas.com/audio and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com and use code AUDIO.
And certainly that was, I think, the component and the sort of Halloween times are approaching and it clicks over from September. There's just something in people's brains that are like, I want to get in this mood. And The Conjuring was right there for them. But I also think we're in a situation that we were akin to in 2022, where starting with the Scream rebootical, there was a horror movie every 4 to 6 weeks that built off of one another, where you would go see it, you'd see a trailer, you knew that was coming out, and it just built and built and built and built and built and built till the point where you had Megan in January of 2023 is a gigantic hit because you'd seen the trailer for the last 4 months, where Smile massively overperforms because people had seen that trailer a bunch going into August. And The Menu did really, really well. There's a whole bunch of movies that we've covered of that particular year that really built on one another, and that people were just like, if I'm going to go see a horror movie, I'm going to go see it with my friends, and we're all going to go to the theater and we're all going to have a good time. And horror is just that one of those spaces, unfortunately, comedy used to occupy, and that the communal experience really is coveted by the audience. But I do think you cannot have these movies come out 1 week after the other. No. There's just no fucking way.
With the price of movies these days, like, people are going to be more judicious.
Yes.
And they're going to remember, okay, all I got to do is wait a month or so and I can watch this at home.
And, it used to be you had a little bit more of a window for people to catch up with the movie. But my personal belief is a horror movie, if it's going to be successful, has to have a 3-week window where the people who show up first weekend are the young people and the horror obsessives. The second week are the people who hear the buzz from that first weekend and go, I was on the fence, but now I'm in. And the third weekend people are, I don't want to miss out. I want to catch up with this thing. The heat might be off of it a little bit, but I still want to see it on one bright wall in a dark room. And if you allow people that, you get a much better response to it. Certainly Weapons had like 4 weeks of that. But I also have to believe there was a trailer in front of the Weapons for this Conjuring Last Rites that played to all of those audiences, and they were like, I had such a fun time with this, I'm coming back for that.
Right.
So now that we've talked about box office, let's talk about a now forgotten controversy, and I put that dick fingers. I'm going to link this in the show notes. But there was this thing that kind of was dredged up when this premiered at Fantastic Fest and a couple venues before its wide release, that Ethan Hawke's portrayal of the grabber was quote unquote gay face.
I mean, are you asking if I agree with that, or you're not asking me anything? Are you?
I'm pushing this out there because it was sort of promoted like, oh, of course, this has to be ruined by the specter of a gay villain. And I think that, listen, I'm not the ultimate authority here, but I also think it completely undoes the whole power dynamic of someone who preys on children. For the grabber quote, it's not really about sex. It's about power, about control. And yes, he gesticulates a little bit and speaks in a sing-songy tone at points. But my personal belief about this is I'm going to believe, BJ Colangelo, who's been on the show a couple times. She has an article about it and how, correlation is not causation when it comes to this. It's an interesting thing that was brought up. I'm not really sure how it plays out. I'm more along the lines of it did cause people to bounce a little bit on that. So there's something to be said for it, but I don't believe it's anyone's intention. And I also think it kind of undoes the whole, if this is going to be your, all villains are gay thing, this is not the best use of that. I think it undoes, I wouldn't say better examples, but more heinous examples of
no, I mean, yeah, he does have a weird voice. Yeah. But I did not get that. That did not seem coded as gay to me. It just seemed coded as weird. Yeah. Creep that he's trying to be creepy because he is creepy.
Right.
I think he's trying to psych out his victims.
Yes. And the way he talks to people completely changes depending on who he's having a conversation with. So I think he's playing all sorts of roles throughout his existence. And I don't want to give, in BJ's words, there's a danger in giving bigots unneeded ammunition.
Of course. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that he is at least trying to give his would-be victims the impression that he's got some kind of thing in him, right? Like this uncontrollable, that you have to be good, or this, because yeah, like you said, he literally puts on different faces because sometimes the mask has got a weird smile and sometimes it's got a frown, and he changes his voice to accommodate that. And yeah, no, I think he's just creepy. And if you want to equate creepy with gay, that's it says
more about you than
right.
It does
that's
about
something
him.
Right. That's something you need to look inward. And if you want to also equate praise on boys, I mean, again, do we still want? Are we really still going to have the discussion of gay man equals potential pedophile?
Right. Yeah.
I guess I can kind of see. But yeah, that could very easily turn into a bad faith argument.
I can see how it might strike somebody, but having watched the movie a couple times now, I don't think it bears out. Someone being sensitive to that is not the same thing as being truly aware as to what the movie is actually putting forth. So I get the impulse. And that, we can sort of confronted this a little bit with weapons as well. Like being sensitive to that is completely understandable. And my read on that sequence was affected by that. I'm not really sure how, intentional any of that was, but I could see how people could read that. Here, I'm less. It almost feels like we're being a little bit overprotective. But then again, if you get that feeling and you're in that affected group, I understand why your hackles are up. I get why your teeth are bared, and I get why your fists are closed. I get it.
Right, but yeah, no, I mean, again, it's not my place to tell other people you're wrong for feeling that way.
Absolutely not.
I just don't. I don't personally. That never, to be honest, that never really crossed my mind.
Yeah, I agree. Are there any other factors at play here that you want to talk about when it comes to the black phone?
Like I said, I think that like for my criticisms, I still think it's a pretty good movie. It's fine.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think that Ethan Hawke has played a lot of unlikable characters, reality bites.
Yeah.
But he doesn't always play a flat out villain. And I think he's having a really good time. And I'm always here for people having a good time playing a villain.
Yeah.
Because like if you look like you're having fun doing it, that makes it so much more effective.
I agree. He had an interesting thing to say about it in the special features because I have the Blu-ray. And he was talking about his estimation, and this will be interesting when we do talk about The Shining, that after The Shining, Jack Nicholson, a little bit of the way he operates, seeing him go quote unquote crazy on screen, unlocked a particular view on him as an actor that audiences couldn't undo after they saw it. And so while he loves to play complicated figures, he had not really played a bunch of villains because he didn't want the same thing to happen to him. But he felt that there was enough at play in this character that he could still hide a portion of himself, the real him, that he might not suffer the same fate. I don't think anyone feels that this is quite as iconic as Nicholson is in The Shining. No. But I did think that was an interesting observation about Nicholson's career post The Shining, that he ends up playing the villain over and over and over again because audiences saw that in The Shining and said, more of that, please. Yeah,
they're now, here's Johnny for the rest of his career.
Right.
But yeah, I think that I don't think this is going to follow him around, but I think it's a nice opportunity for. I've always felt that he was so effective as a complete asshole in Reality Bites.
True, that's what has followed him around a lot more than this.
Literally did not like him for. Yeah. I did that soap opera fan thing of imprinting my feelings about the character onto him for many years.
Yeah,
and then probably within the past 10 years or so, certainly since oh my God, I'm blanking out of the movie where he plays the priest.
Oh yes.
The Paul Schrader movie.
The Paul Schrader film, yeah.
Yeah. Certainly since the Richard Linklater Before Sunrise movies, with Boyhood, I'm like, oh, he's actually a really good actor.
Yeah, First Reformed.
First Reformed. Yes. Thank you. For some reason, I kept thinking Last Rites. I'm like, no, that's not it.
But because he's a priest.
Right. But if you folks, if you're listening, if you've never seen First Reformed, I mean, it is not an easy movie to watch.
No,
particularly in as things are the way they are in the world right now. But he is incredible in it, and it's an absolute crime that he was not remembered during awards season because he's amazing in it, and he's really grown. And I say even in Sinister, he's quite good in that.
Yes.
And so I think this is an opportunity for him to stretch his acting muscles, and he had a good time with it, and it really came through.
I agree. Very good film. Before we abscond into the middle of the night, never to be seen again, of course, we have to choose our own deathventure. That's where we decide of the deaths portrayed in this film. If we were forced to die in one of those ways, which one would it be and why? First up to bid, undetermined self-harm. So that's fun. How about stabbed in the heart and neck slashed? Or you could get stabbed to death. You're stabbed to death. Or then you get your face slashed and then you're stabbed to death. Or stabbed to death. Axe to the back of the head. Or beaten by a loaded phone receiver, ankle snapped, choked, and then neck broken by phone cord. Gina, you're my co-pilot, and I choose you to go first.
I mean, I do think it's comical that he is choked to death by like a 12-year-old.
Right. But he's using leverage. And there's this whole thing of like Bruce telling him, oh, your arm's mint. Like you can actually use that arm to do this. And, the other kid in school who, kind of gets his vibe and understands him to be a good kid is kind of like, you can stand up for yourself. You're not being confident in your own abilities here. And they just have to talk him into it.
You can choke a grown man. You could choke out a grown man.
He's working with leverage, and leverage goes a long way.
But that being said, I'm going to take the axe to the back of the head.
Oh, hell yeah. That's the only choice here is axe to the back of the head.
I like that. I get a kick. That character, he's almost comic relief.
Yes. Because he's so close to the truth, and then it's only revealed later how close to the fucking truth he was.
Yeah, he's literally like Charlie Day in front of the serial killer wall, and It's Always Sunny, but it's like literally underneath his feet.
Who reads Philadelphia as Pepe Silva? That's just one of those things where it probably took me 6 years to actually get that joke, but when I did, I really fucking got that joke. Yeah, it's a great character. It's a very funny moment. And it helps seal the deal for me. Like there's just enough of the elements here that work for me, that really work for me. Folks, go to our t-shirt shop. We have new t-shirts for you to check out. We have My Vital Juices that you demanded. We have a paperback version of our season 6 Stephen King art that you should probably order immediately or give to a friend that you enjoy.
The holiday season's coming.
It's closer than you think. And then, of course, you could join us on Patreon, where we're doing lots of bonus materials for you, extra episodes, commentaries, Q&As. We've got it all. Find us on your social medias. You talk back to us on YouTube, on Spotify, rate and review us on iTunes. It helps us be seen and heard by more people. Gina, where can people find you on these here internets?
I write about movies and pop culture at my newsletter, GinaWatchesThings.ghost.io. And I am I'm taking a little bit of a break, but occasionally on Blue Sky under Gina Does Things.
Do it today, people. Check it out. Don't worry. The body count will continue. For myself and for Gina, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
They're all